Hey there, micro folks. This is Mr. Hooker, and this is Chapter 20, Uncertainty, Risk, and Private Information. This is the one that, kind of doesn't belong for Module 3, but we need to do it. And this is the last one, so this is the one you've been looking for, folks. Let's get to it. Um, so this is kind of in this chapter is all about insurance and stuff like that. So extreme weather. By 2020, Californians had endured years of catastrophic drought and wildfires. They caused close to 100 billion in damages, claimed more than 200 lives. In 2021, the weather patterns changed, bringing heavy rains and flooding, the opposite end of that spectrum, resulting in multiple deaths and 30 billion in losses. Floridians haven't fared any better. 22 Hurricane Ian caused insured losses of up to 65 billion, 156 confirmed deaths. So uncertainty is just a feature of the world. So here's the thing, and I have seen this before. So basically, all of us in the rest of the country, if you do not live in California or Florida, and California and Florida each have their own like special insurance funds, but and those are disasters. But if you don't live in one of those two states, you are basically paying for the insurance in those two states. So you were funding all of the disasters in those two states for the insurers that are in those two states. It's kind of nuts how that works, but and this is why insurers do not like claims filed pretty much anywhere else in the world or anywhere else in the country. Um, they treat that as a no-no because they know how much they're going to pay out. And that's also why a lot of insurers have already left Florida. And I think insurers are leaving California at the same rate now, too. Um, so the economics of risk aversion. In general, people don't like risk, willing to pay a price to avoid it. So Americans pay insurance companies more than $1 trillion in premiums every year just to avoid risk. But what is risk and why don't people like it? So let's look at that. We have expectations and uncertainty. So to understand risk, we need to look at the concept of expected value and the meaning of that uncertainty. So a random variable is a variable with an uncertain future value. So no one can predict a random variable, but we can calculate the expected value of that random variable. So the weighted average of all possible values, where the weights correspond to probabilities of possible values, is the way we do that. So to find the expected value of a random variable, we imagine there are a number of different states of the world or possible future events. You don't know what state's going to actually happen, but you can assign probabilities one for each state of the world. And this is where the math comes in. So P1 is the probability of state one, P2 probability of state two. Keep on running that out. And you know the realized value of the random variable in each state of the world is S1 in state one, S2 in state two, so on and so on. So there's n possible states. So the expected value of a random variable is P1 times S1 plus P2 times S2 plus P3 times S3, so on and so forth, on out to Pn times Sn. All right. So if the Lee family faces a 50% chance of no medical expenses and a 50% chance of a $10,000 medical expenses, the expected value of its medical expenses is zero point 0.5 times 0 plus zero point 0.5 times 10,000 or 0 plus 5,000, which is equal to 5,000. So risk is the uncertainty about future outcomes. When the uncertainty about the monetary outcomes, it becomes financial risk. So the logic of risk aversion is this. Why is it a bad thing? It's tied to the concept of diminishing marginal utility. To understand how the two are linked, we need to look not only at the medical costs, but how those costs affect the income of the income the family had left after the medical expenses. So if we assume the family had income of 30,000, the expected income after the medical expenses is zero point 0.5 times the 30,000 plus zero point 0.5 times the 10,000. Because remember, possibility of $10,000 of medical expenses. So half of 30 is 15, half of 20 is 10, so that is 25,000. So expected utility is the expected value of an individual's total utility given uncertainty about future outcomes. So expected utility of the family is less than it would be if the family didn't face any risk and knew with certainty that income would after medical expenses would be 25,000. So this gives us a utility function, and then that looks like this. So income of 20,000, you have total utility of 920 on up to an income of 30,000 gives us a total utility of 1080. So state S, so what is that? S1 um, at 20,000, we have that utility of 920. And then there at H1, we are at 30,000 with 1080. So there's your marginal utilities there on the bottom. So most people are risk averse. They're going to choose to reduce the risk when the cost of that reduction leaves the expected value of their income or their wealth unchanged. And that's the key there. If it leaves the expected value of their income or wealth unchanged, they'd be willing to purchase what we call a fair insurance policy, which is a policy for which the premium is equal to the expected value of the claims. Note, most insurance policies available are not fair insurance policies. All right, so the effect of fair insurance on the Lee family outcome and expected utility. Expected utility is probability of state H times the total utility in state H, and the probability of S times the total utility in state S. So without insurance, it's $0 in medical expenses, 0.5, and 10,000 in medical expenses, which is also 0.5, 30 and 20. So 0.5 times 30, 0.5 and 20 is 25,000. Expected utility 0.5 times 1080, 0.5 times 920 leaves you with 1,000 utils. With fair insurance, you're going to be at 25,000 all the way across. 0.5 times 25,000, 0.5 times 25,000, you're at 25,000. So you're $25,000 in expected value of income either way, but the utility is where it changes. 0.5 times 1025 and 0.5 times 1025 leaves you at 1025. You end up with 25 more utils that way. So with the fair insurance. Almost everybody's risk averse because almost everyone has diminishing marginal utility. However, there are people out there who are risk seekers. Those kinds of people are rare, but they exist. Um, so most everybody has diminishing marginal utility. A dollar gain when income is low adds more to utility than a dollar gain when income is high. So think about that. Like think about Jeff Bezos, um, like any kind of music star you want to think of, movie star, right? If you gained $1,000 this week, it would mean a lot to you. If they gained $1,000 this week, it really wouldn't mean that much to them because they're already rich. So basically, there's a diminishing marginal utility to that money. So some people are more risk averse than others. Risk neutral person is completely insensitive to risk. And then some individuals differ in risk aversion for a couple of main reasons differences in preferences. So some people differ in how much their marginal utility is affected by income. And then there's a difference in initial income and wealth. The possible loss of $1,000 makes a big difference to a family living below the poverty threshold. Makes very little difference to somebody who makes $1 million a year. They'd be like, okay, whatever. It's kind of nuts. So there was a guy, this has been about a year, 2 years maybe. One of the billionaires here in the country had a thing, and he was talking to somebody who was giving an interview, and it was a little bit tone deaf. Not a little bit tone deaf. It was very tone deaf. But he was talking about the thing that scared him were the poor people. As the guy said, so who are the poor people? Like what who are there? And he's like, well, those people who make less than $1 million. And so anybody that was $1 million or less, he called poor. That made $1 million or less a year, he was calling poor. So that was just like, dude, like that's most of the country. Like, we're not billionaires. It was kind of nuts. So the differences in risk aversion, Danny would gain. You got Mel's utility function and Danny's utility function. So note that Mel's utility function is a little bit flatter and Danny's is very curved. And then Mel's margin utility curve is flat and Danny's is steep. Okay? This is important to note. Danny would gain a little from a rise in income, but lose a lot from a fall in income. He is highly risk averse. So Mel would gain as much from higher income as much as he would lose from lower income. So he's barely risk averse. So Danny gains more from insurance than Mel. So if you have this very curved utility function and this very steep utility curve, you gain more from insurance than if you have the flat ones. So if yours is flat, you don't gain near as much from insurance as the other folks. Oops, come on. So people would be better off taking out a fair insurance policy, which is a policy that leaves their expected income unchanged but eliminates their risk. But real insurance policies are rarely fair because insurance companies have to cover other costs, so they charge more than they expect to pay in claims. But would people still want to buy unfair insurance policy? So it depends on the size of the premium. So risk averse individuals are willing to pay a premium that exceeds their expected claim, and the risk neutral person is unwilling to pay at all to reduce their risk. So risk neutral people are just like, yeah, no, I ain't buying the insurance. It's okay. It ain't happening. We just not gonna buy it. And so that's just kind of the way that works out. They just don't buy the insurance. There was an article out, and y'all can look this up. State of Mississippi, almost nobody has car insurance, at least like middle income or lower. And part of the reason is a ticket for no insurance in Mississippi is cheaper than having insurance. So even if you get a ticket for having no insurance, it's cheaper than actually buying the insurance. So people just don't get insurance. And if they get caught with no insurance, they just pay the ticket, which was cheaper than getting the insurance. It's kind of crazy. Um, and so the guy that wrote it's like he was talking about like he heard from somebody that somebody ran in the back of him and the guy didn't have had really bad brakes and um, said, I'm sorry, my brakes don't work. I'm so sorry about that. And says, yeah, I've been meaning to get them fixed. But you have a blessed day. We'll see you later. And so he pushed his car back and then went around the guy and just left. Didn't leave his information with him or anything. Just took off. See y'all later. Um, kind of thing like that. All right. Before or after the fact. So when you buy a donut, you know what you're going to get. When you buy insurance, by definition, you have no idea what you're getting. So it's hard to assess the rationality of insurance purchases or any decision made in the face of uncertainty. After the fact, we have more information, less uncertainty, and those decisions are almost always subject to second guessing. So I lived in North Carolina about 8 years ago, 10 to 8 years ago, 8 to 10. Um, I had a friend who had a condo on the Outer Banks, and hurricanes came through. And I think Hurricane Michael came through while we were there, and she had hurricane insurance. She filed for the hurricane insurance. The insurance company denied her claim and said it wasn't the hurricane that ripped her roof off. It was the high winds and rain. And, we were like a little baffled by that one. because what is a hurricane except high winds and rain? So this goes to this point. Like you don't know what you're getting when you buy the insurance to start with, because like she bought hurricane insurance. A hurricane came, and the insurance company's like, "Oh yeah, but it wasn't really the hurricane. It was just the high winds and rain." Like that is what a hurricane is, ladies and gentlemen. Um, we're gonna stop right there, and I'll pick this up in video two. Take care.